Hey, everybody, it's Adnan Virk from ESPN, and you're listening to two of my favorites, Graham and Chris, out of left field right now.
Hey, guys, Graham and Chris back here with you for another week of Out of Left Field. Great to have you guys tuning in. Love doing the show with you guys being here with us. We have some great news to report before we put the ball in play. We mentioned this really early on in the season that Colorado Rockies right-hander Chad Bettis was going to be out for a good period of time after a reoccurrence of testicular cancer. And a few days ago, he did share via Instagram that he has wrapped up his final session of chemotherapy, so it's not clear what exactly is going to be going on with him as far as his return. His goal, he said, is to get back with the Rockies, so we are very happy to hear that from him. A huge congratulations and heartfelt thoughts from us that he is doing well, and also good thoughts now to Jameson Taillon, who underwent surgery this past week for the same type of cancer, a righty for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So it was shown to be testicular cancer. Hopefully it's been caught early. Haven't heard much on that, but our thoughts go out to him as well. So with that being said, we'll put the ball in play. Chris, man, what's going on? Another week of at least no exams, but school is back in session for you, and I know you're getting back to the grind for just a couple more weeks before you get into your student teaching and then off to the high school kids for a semester.
Yeah, just a few weeks of a couple of history classes, some really interesting subject matter. I'm studying the Crusades, and then I'm doing another historical inquiry methods course that's a lot of fun, all except for the 15-page paper I'm going to have to write at the end of it. But only 6 weeks of school during the summer. I'll get actually most of the month of July off, so I'm pretty happy about that because I'm going to be able to watch a lot of baseball.
And that's the best part, really, of being off in the summertime is that. So, let's time out. Let's redo this. I feel a little bit off on the opening. Just redo it. Just get a quick countdown. I'm going to just cut this out. Something's kind of not flowing right, and then we'll roll back into it.
Okay.
Just odd, I know.
By the way, the Indians just completed their...
Yeah, I saw you mouth game over.
It was fucked up because they had the runner on first, and the batter behind him hit this shot to right field, and it looked like it was getting down, and it just hung. And, of course, he took off, and they fucking doubled him off at first base.
Taillon said that today I lost a piece of my manhood, but today I'm feeling more like a man than I ever have.
Well, good for him. I hope he's feeling better, man.
All right, here we go. 5.
Oh, come on. Sorry.
5, 4. Hey, guys, welcome back to Out of Left Field. Graham and Chris here with you. A lot of stuff to get to this week. It is the 1-year anniversary. Happy birthday to Out of Left Field. We're going to have a special guest stop by, Adnan Virk, our good friend, been on quite a few times with us. He's going to come by and join us for our anniversary. We also celebrate the 1-year anniversary of his Cinephile podcast, a movie podcast, which we love. We hope you guys check out at Cinephile ESPN on Twitter. Of course, you can find it on iTunes, on the ESPN Pod Center, all that good stuff. But he's got a great passion for movies. So we're going to talk a little bit of movies, some baseball, just have some fun. And, of course, we'll be talking Freddie Freeman, another injury, a big injury to a club who, granted, is not making any waves in the standings in the NL East, but still a big injury to one of the top hitters in the National League. Plus, of course, our backstop of the week will go behind the mask, and we will continue the debate about ties in baseball. We got some good feedback from you all this past week. We're going to try and maybe curtail the argument a little bit, try and make it a little bit more clear as to what we were thinking. But as we put the ball in play, want to start off with good news on two fronts. Chad Bettis, the right-handed pitcher for the Colorado Rockies, who we mentioned earlier this year that he had been removed from the team due to a reoccurrence of testicular cancer, shared via Instagram that he is finishing up his last round of chemotherapy, should be cancer-free. There's no timetable for his return, but again, we reached out to him when this all began. Again, we reached out to him as well, saying just congratulations on another big win in this fight. We hope this is the last time you got to fight this, and just congratulations and a lot of heartfelt happiness from us. On the same side, Jameson Taillon, I'm hoping to get that last name right, a righty for the Pittsburgh Pirates, underwent surgery about a week and a half ago for what was suspected and later proven to be testicular cancer. He came out with a statement said in part, and great to him for at least having a little bit of humor, said that, quote, "Today I lost a piece of my manhood, but today I'm feeling more like a man than I ever have," end quote. So there's no timetable for his return, but he has been cleared already to resume light baseball activities, which is just fantastic. He has been at PNC Park with his teammates this week, played catch, so everything looks great for him, so congratulations to him as well.
Yeah, listen, I know we have both men and women listen to this show on a pretty regular basis, so I just want to say to everybody, catching it early is the key, right? Early catch on both breast cancer and testicular cancer are important for survival rates. Please, please, please do the recommended checks. Go to the website, learn how to do it, learn how to find it. If you feel something, please go see a doctor. Because obviously these guys are Major League Baseball players. They have excellent health care coverage. They have they have people looking after them all the time. But they catch these things early, and their survival rates are through the roof. If you catch it early on your own, your survival rate also will be through the roof. So please, 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 as someone who has survived way too many loved ones passing away from cancer, please check yourself out. If you feel something that seems out of whack, go get checked out.
Yeah, and that's something also that baseball is also big on is prostate cancer awareness. Not to bring it down, guys, but I believe it is. I want to say it's September is the month that is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Quite a few years back, you may recall, similar to Mother's Day, where you see the pink wristbands that umpires wear. They actually have wristbands that are blue that say, stay in the game, prostate cancer awareness. So same thing as a guy who my father passed away from prostate cancer. Again, like Chris said, get the checks. We love talking baseball, but as we always said, we want to make sure we do everything we can to keep you guys safe out there and keep you guys in the game. So that goes adults, kids, all the way around. So as we step into the box, we got a lefty in the box for the first at-bat of the show. And unfortunately, that was Freddie Freeman, who got drilled in the hand with a pitch. Nothing purposeful about it. I think we both could agree that nothing that you saw. It was just one of those up-and-in fastballs he tried to get away from, and it caught him just on the bottom side, just below really the heel of the hand on that wrist. And he ended up suffering a non-displaced fracture, which is great. Non-displaced, it's a good thing. No real surgery needed, but it's still a 10-week minimum timetable until you're going to see Freddie Freeman back in SunTrust Park. And, Chris, you were telling me some of the numbers that Freeman's been putting up this year, and for a ball club that has been struggling and was not expected to do well, as both Hall of Famer John Smoltz and Tom Glavine mentioned to us earlier this year, he was doing things that no one really, I think, would have expected this early out of the gate.
Right, and like I said when we were talking earlier, and we'll get into this more next week when we have another special guest on the show, but right now Freddie Freeman is leading the majors in OPS at 1.209, which is a huge number, right? The guy's hitting 341, his on-base is 461, he's slugging 748, he's hit 14 home runs. I mean, he's just swinging the bat. He's raking the ball. Unfortunately, he takes that fastball on the wrist, and he's going to sit for 10 weeks, and 10 weeks is a huge cooling-off period for a hitter in baseball.
It is, and as Chris mentioned, the aforementioned special guest next week, since it is kind of our birthday here out of left field, Chip Carey, who was our first guest, a guy I grew up listening to, watching in Orlando, obviously a long lineage of calling baseball, the grandson of the late and famed broadcaster Harry Carey, and of course Skip Carey of the Braves. He'll be joining us, so looking forward to having him along. And we'll also be talking about the fact that just as of today, the Braves did sign, or at least made a trade, I should say, to the Cardinals for Matt Adams. So for cash considerations, they're going to bring him in. We know that there have been some issues. They signed James Loney, a veteran, after they released Ryan Howard. There really hasn't been any clear-cut person that could fill in that void. And let's be honest, no matter who you go out and get, no one's going to fill the void that Freddie Freeman's, injury is going to leave in that lineup. It's just not going to happen. But to have someone hopefully who can be in there, we should see him back before the All-Star break. Hopefully he's getting back into regular season form. Obviously, it's going to take him a while between his times in the minors to go ahead and get his at-bats, get back to seeing big league pitching, and get in that box. So swift recovery to him, and again, we'll touch on that just a bit more next week. Now, as we mentioned, Freddie Freeman, a guy that he's had issues with, obviously, has been umpires. He's not a guy who gets into a lot of issues with umpires, but there are times when he has been at the plate and he gets a little chirp. We've seen it. He got ejected, I think, a couple times in the last couple of years. And I say that because if you go behind the mask, we're not going to start talking about ejections and that kind of thing. It's a bit more of a somber week this week behind the mask. Former Major League umpire Steve Palermo passed away May 14th, just about a week ago. Really, it'll be a week when the show goes up tomorrow, May 21st. He passed away May 14th. Was an umpire in the American League. For those of you who may not remember, if you're younger, baseball used to basically be split. The leagues were split. The AL played the AL, NL played the NL, and the umpires worked in their own specific league. The teams for the World Series literally did not see each other, did not sniff each other until you get into the postseason. So Steve Palermo was an American League umpire from 1977 to 1991. He is, by all accounts, one of the best ball strikes umpires to ever work the game. And that's from multiple different people who knew him, worked with him, were back there. He wore the number 14, and the reason that he stopped umpiring in 1991, he was in Dallas outside of a restaurant called Campese's, and there was an altercation when basically a woman was trying to get home and she was being robbed. Fellow umpire Rich Garcia, they were there after a game with the Rangers, and two waitresses were outside being mugged. They attempted to apprehend the muggers who were obviously trying to harm these women. Palermo suffered a bullet wound to his spinal cord. He was instantly paralyzed from the waist down. Obviously, could no longer umpire. He was told he would never walk again. And through extreme grit and determination and a lot of pain, he was able to regain the ability to walk, the leg brace and a cane. And that year, 1991, probably one of the only times in history this has happened, an umpire threw out the ceremonial first pitch in Game 1 of the 1991 World Series. Only months?
Months,
really, yeah. He was later a supervisor of umpiring from 95 to 97. He was an analyst for the Yankees part-time. And after battling cancer, he passed away at the age of 67. So our thoughts go out to his family, his wife, all the baseball community and their family, all the umpires out there. But a huge tip of the cap, and just positive thoughts to a guy who, his life was forever changed doing the right thing. And oftentimes, umpires looked at as the villains of the game. They're not. They're real people. They're people who are going to do the right thing and put the situation. And Steve Palermo, put his life and his career on the line and lost one of those because he did the right thing and ended up saving two women's lives that day in Dallas.
So, as you know, Graham, I have half-season tickets to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I went to the May 15th game between the Diamondbacks and the Tigers. The Diamondbacks and the Mets. And I actually had the opportunity to experience the Major League moment of silence for Steve Palermo that night at that game. And they told his story. They told that whole story, the one that you just related, and it ended up being a pretty powerful moment. And you could see that there were a couple of older umpires on the field who were really affected by that moment of silence. It ended up being a really powerful moment in that game.
They're a family. There's no doubt about it. At the end of the day, everyone goes home. The one ball club goes to a hotel. One ball club goes back to their houses. But they're all that club is together. When it comes down to it, you've got 4 guys who travel for a living. They don't have a home ball club. They don't have a home field. It's hotels. It's room service. It's stop where you can, get what you can, and it's a job that you're criticized from the moment you walk out there until the moment you leave, sometimes after. And Steve Palermo did it with class and did it the right way. And when I tell guys, that the goal when you walk onto a field as an umpire, and maybe this is a little bit odd to say, but my goal has always been to leave the game in a better place than it was when I found it. And that can be in the smallest of things. You can be talking to a kid who's having a rough game, just kind of making him, kind of see the bigger picture, what the game is about. And Steve Palermo undeniably left a bigger mark on the game and left the game of baseball in a much better place than it was when he found it.
So we've had a couple of sort of somber moments on the show today, and I'd just like to try to get into something a little bit more upbeat before we
10-game winning streak might help.
Before we get into our Defender of the Week this week. Yeah, so look at the Texas Rangers, man. You and I both predicted, I think, that the Astros are going to take that division. They're just strong on paper. That's our team. They're the best team in baseball right now. Neither of us expect that to change, but
I don't think we expect them to be this damn good either. Right. They are light years beyond I think what either of us thought they might actually be.
But the Texas Rangers have made a push, and they have refused to go quietly into that good night, and they're on a 10-game win streak, and they are pushing. Obviously, you and I have both seen these streaks come and go. We saw the Rangers do it last year, or we saw the Astros do it last year. We saw the Mariners do it at the end of the year with an opportunity to push into the playoffs, where maybe if they had gotten to 10, they might have gotten there. They got to 9 and kind of fell short. And it's May, so obviously we're not expecting this to continue throughout the rest of the season, but they're playing really good baseball right now.
They really are. And to be honest, we've seen guys, they were hampered pretty good by injuries starting it off. Obviously, Adrian Beltre had a calf strain. He finally ran for the first time on the 16th. Carlos Gomez has a hammy strain. Hamels had it was an oblique. It was just one thing after another. And you're thinking, okay, Yu Darvish is getting older. They picked up Andrew Kashner. You got a decent lineup going through. Mike Napoli is doing what Mike Napoli does. I don't think either of us really thought that he was going to be as productive as he was this early on. It makes you wonder kind of what the Indians are thinking. Granted, I'm sure Edwin Encarnacion is going to pick up as the season progresses and as his time in Cleveland progresses. But Nap's a vet, man. He's going to do what he's got to do. He knows how to pick up a ball club. He's fiery. But he's one of those guys who he's been there, done that. He's got the jewelry to prove he knows what he's doing. And I think he is, to me right now, really the heartbeat of that club. He's that older guy, and it's what they were looking for. Elvis Andrus has been there for a while, but Knapp is just that grizzled, bearded vet who you look for. I think Rougned Odor is a guy who's going to have to eventually be that for how much he's made and how much he's being paid, and for what – for as good as he is on that ball club and for as long as he's going to be there. And we discussed this after the Bautista incident last year, that eventually he's going to need to grow up and mature and be that leader. And it's the same thing kind of that we're seeing out of Bryce Harper. Both are really fiery guys. Bryce maybe a little bit more so. And I think the question is, at what point do you start to see a little bit more maturity out of those guys? But yeah, they're doing things that we didn't expect, but we also saw the Astros do this last year when the scripts were flipped. And they were my late pick of the year after the All-Star break. I thought they were going to have a chance to actually come back and pick up the division. They didn't because pitching was rough. Right now, the same issue is happening in Texas. The difference, though, is where McCullers didn't really pick up and it was just Keuchel, and Keuchel couldn't get back to form. Darvish is pitching very well like we expect him to pitch. And if Cole Hamels comes back and can get into the groove relatively quickly, there's a good possibility that, it's a streaky game. If you get a little bit of a slide in Houston, you get a little bit more of a rise in Arlington, we could see really a lot of fun starting to happen in the AL West, and maybe get a battle of the Lone Star State.
And that would be fun to watch. I think that one of the keys, and we always come up with these keys to the win, or keys to the game, or keys to the series, or whatever, and everybody does it. But one of the keys to the Texas Rangers season, I think, going forward, and seasons going forward, is going to be Joey Gallo, right? He's either going to live up to the potential that he has, this number one overall prospect potential that he lived under for the last couple of years, or he's not. And right now, he's just not. Yeah, he hit a dinger in last night's game, but the kid's hitting 188. He's got 138 at bats and 63 strikeouts. So when you're striking out almost half the time, you're not living up to the potential, or you're not living up to the expectations that everybody's kind of putting on you. And
the oddity there is a 188 average, but he's slugging 514.
Right.
Which is the issue, when he makes contact, it's impressive. Right. When he makes contact, it's impressive. 13 dingers, 4 dubs, and a triple. But the problem is when he's not making contact, he's just walking back to the dugout.
Here's a stat for you that might blow your mind a little bit. Joey Gallo, in 138 at bats, has 26 total hits. Half of them are long balls.
Wow. Yeah, as I'm looking at 18 total extra base hits, which means only 8 singles to his credit, and everything else is just, man, that's
He has 13 home runs, 4 doubles, and a triple.
Yep.
And 63 strikeouts. He's walked 20 times. So what it tells me is that the kid's got power, obviously. He can hit the ball a long, long way. He hit it 450-something feet last night. But he has no control over himself in the batter's box.
Here's my worry with Joey Gallo is we're seeing things very similar to what we saw with Aaron Judge last year. The problem right now is we've got 3 seasons to look at Joey Gallo and see what he has done. Aaron Judge was his first year last year. He struggled. No big deal. It happens. He's come back. He's made the changes. And and obviously the numbers speak for themselves. Joey Gallo's first year in the bigs was 2015. All right. 108 at bats. He hit 204. Still struck out 57 times. He's a strikeout machine. 6 homers, a triple, 3 doubles, 22 hits. Okay? So at the end of the day, about the same thing. So 10 extra base hits, 22 total. Last year in 17 games, he had 1 hit. It was a solo shot. He walked 5 times and struck out 19 times in 25 games for a 0.40 average. And this year, he's hitting 188. So the problem, we really kind of praised the Rangers last year and grabbing Lucroy, making some of those grabs they wanted to play to make a push into the postseason, which then obviously was just brought to a grinding halt by the Blue Jays. Was it the Blue Jays? Yeah, Blue Jays, and then they lost to the Indians.
Right.
But we thought, okay, they kept Joey Gallo, and I can't remember who the other guy was we were talking about over. There was another guy who
they kept
their
top two prospects anyway.
Right. And then the problem now is that because you've kept him and you're starting to see a bigger trend with him, now to me his trade value is shrinking. So unless he can find a way or talk to whoever the hell it was that Aaron Judge talked to, which we've talked about, we're going to ask Adnan Virk when he's on with us because obviously he is working with Mark Teixeira now, who was Teixeira was Judge's teammate last year in the Bronx. If Gallo doesn't start to pick it up, he's going to end up just being, to me, a piece of dead weight on that Rangers roster. And I get as soon as Beltre comes back, he's not going to see playing time. But it worries me long term because you and I both thought he would be the kind of the piece that rolled over to third once Beltre retired. I would not be comfortable with that anymore.
I mean, at this point, to be honest with you, I'm ready to praise the Cleveland Indians for not getting Gallo in that trade. I mean, that might have been to their benefit.
The Brewers.
I'm sorry, the Brewers. The Brewers for not picking up Gallo in that trade and sort of chide the Texas Rangers for not giving up Gallo at a time when his trade stock was really high. Because
it's still surprising based on how he performed last year, but right. Smaller sample size gives you a little bit more to kind of, well, you haven't seen everything yet.
Right, but based on what he's doing right now, I mean, he's got no trade stock to speak of. He will have no trade stock if he continues to hit this way or if he continues to strike out this way anyway. I was talking to a guy yesterday who's a buddy of mine who's a big baseball fan, who actually I was going to talk to you about possibly inviting on the show one time. And okay. He's a college baseball player. He's a high school baseball player. But we were talking about guys like him or guys who hit 25 or 30 home runs a season, but they hit 220, right? And if you would rather have a guy that hit 8 home runs a season and hit 300 or 305, like a Buster Posey type guy, right?
The way Jeter used to be.
The way Jeter used to be.
Yeah, maybe 20 was a good year, but a 300 plus, yeah.
In Buster Posey's MVP season, he had 18 home runs, but he hit 340 something. Or 331. So we figured
you said right now he's what, 376?
379 he's hitting right now. Yeah, 379.
And he is not – and here's the thing, guys, 379, and believe it or not, he is not
number
Chris's
2
backstop of the week.
No. And it's only good enough for number 2 in the National League.
Yeah, Ryan Zimmerman's having just a hell of a year.
Right. And he's tied with Justin Turner from the L.A. Dodgers, who's also just raking right now. I mean, there are some averages in the National League, but we'll get to that. Anyway, this kid, I mean, we figured it out that the difference between 230 and 300 is about 50 hits, right, over the course of a season. And if that guy who's hitting 220 and 25 home runs would instead get 50 additional hits, the guys in front of him would be crossing the plate more often. That is what helps players become an impact to their team, not the long ball.
Agreed. And that's the issue with baseball today. And I heard the same thing mentioned the other day, and I think it actually might have been in the it was in the, I think the Cardinals game. Actually might have been yesterday, the Cardinals Giants game, and I can't recall who the batter was, but with 2 strikes, I mean he's given a full-fledged power swing, and the announcers, I believe it was the CSN Bay Area guys, so it would have been the guys that you're used to listening to, were saying just how the game has changed in that way that the idea of guys just choking up and putting the ball in play, like an Anthony Rizzo really has, focuses on doing, is gone for the most part. And guys have such a long ball, get it out of the park mentality that playing that small ball, knock it around the yard, move from base to base to base, which is going to drive guys in, a lot of guys just don't like that mentality, and that starts to me down in the lower levels. I get Chick-Stig the long ball, but the problem is that the long ball is so celebrated that the idea of giving up yourself, sac flies are celebrated, but moving a guy from second to third, getting a single that moves a guy from first to second or from first to third should be just as celebrated, should be just as important. And it's not. And that's going to go into something that we're going to get into a little bit later today as to really why baseball doesn't appeal to as much of the United States and in certain cultures, which we've touched on here a few times. But no, that's a great point because it is. I think it's a big reason why records are as low as they are sometimes and why power numbers may be so high. Slugging and OPS may be huge, but on base and average is so low.
Right. Well, let's look at that Giants game for a second last night because you made an excellent point there. The St. Louis Cardinals
try to do that once a month. I try to do that. That's my goal.
The St. Louis Cardinals scored 2 quick runs on high energy plays. A guy hit a double, then he got moved over on a single, came in and scored. So they scored 2 runs on high energy plays relatively early in the game, and the Giants have to come back and manufacture runs, right? Get a guy on, guy hits a double, or a guy hits a single, he gets moved over by another single, guy bunts those 2 over, right? Gorky Hernandez bunts those 2 over, and they start manufacturing runs, right? They score 1 run, then another.
And to your point, I want you to think about this. Something you had talked about with the possibility of ties or changing extra innings. That's the kind of baseball you have to play if you're going to start putting guys on second or first or second. That's the kind of baseball you need to play to win games.
Right, exactly. And it's just not prevalent anymore. But, the Giants manufactured 3 runs, and none of the plays that they scored, those 3 runs, were really high-energy plays. There was a great single by Denard Span that kind of made you jump around a little bit. But at the end of the day, those 3 runs were scored on small ball sort of tactics. And then what happens? The Cardinals come back and hit a 3-run blast, right, to go up 5-3. And then what do the Giants do? They come back for 2 innings in the 8th and 9th inning, and they manufacture runs on small ball again, and they end up winning 6-5. And that is how baseball used to be won. You don't see squeeze plays anymore. You don't see suicide plays anymore. That stuff doesn't happen in the big leagues as often as it used to. And I miss it, for one, because one of my favorite plays in the world is suicide squeezes.
It's one of the most like heart-stopping plays because that and then a straight steal at home because so much goofy stuff can happen.
Is he going to put it down the first baseline like he's supposed to? Is he going to get it down far enough? Is he going to get it down clean enough? Is he going to pop it up? What's going to happen?
Is he going to get down? Period.
Right. The runner from third has to take off. Right. It has to be like a hit and run. The runner from third has to take off. You never know if that ball goes past the bat and into the catcher's glove. Game over, man.
Yep.
I love suicide squeeze.
It's a great part of the game, no doubt. And it's ironic.
See it anymore.
Go ahead. Exactly. And I wish baseball would get back to that to that style of play. And something else, as we've been talking a lot about the Rangers and and you mentioned Jonathan Lucroy and also Aaron Judge. That really Lucroy being a catcher, Judge on the Yankees. It's funny because I happen to recall something about a catcher and the Yankees that you mentioned to me earlier this week before we came on the show.
Well, I'm sorry. What was that?
Wow, you completely spaced on me, didn't you?
I did. You said something I mentioned.
So I want you guys hang on. Yeah, I want you all to appreciate for me the segue. Send me some love at OO Left Field on Twitter, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook, the Out of Left Field Baseball community page as well. You can always get a hold of me straight at Graham_OOLF or Chris_OOLF on Twitter as well. Now, as I was saying, by segue, I was saying that, we're talking about Jonathan Lucroy, who's a catcher, and Aaron Judge, who plays. Actually, you know what? The hell with it. You guys appreciate the segue. Chris, take us to the backstop of the week, please.
Right. Sorry. And I did totally space on you. And this week's Defender of the Week is actually a backstop for only the second time since we've had this segment on. And I got to go with Gary Sanchez. I mean, he goes down early in the season. He's injured. He's on the DL. And everybody's worried, right, that when he comes back, he's just not going to be the Gary Sanchez that we saw him last season towards the end of the season, and that he's just not going to be able to perform. And, of course, it's always a little bit of a worry for catchers, that they're not going to be able to get back into the swing or whatever, but especially for big hitters. And I would just like to point out that Gary Sanchez is not just hitting right now. Gary Sanchez is raking right now. He's all over it. He came back. It's like he never even skipped a beat. He's just hitting the ball all over the park. He's hitting the ball out of the park. He's got a few home runs to his credit, and he's right back at it behind the plate as well, framing pitches, calling great games. Today was sort of an exception. They did go down 9-5 to the Rays, but overall, Sanchez has had a really great return. And if there's anything that you can really appreciate from a player, is it's that ability to go down on an injury and then come back and play like nothing ever happened. Play just as well as you were playing before you left. So while he's not the greatest throw him out at second base arm in the league, he's got a couple of caught stealings to his credit. He's playing really well behind the plate, and like I said, he's impacting his team in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect a guy to do coming off of an injury immediately.
And to me, we talk so much, and I know there's no statistic to really quantify this, but the fact that the way that Gary Sanchez calls a game for guys like Tanaka and Pineda and Sabathia, guys who have been around for a good chunk of time in the big leagues, he calls a game like a veteran catcher. He took over for Brian McCann, who is a veteran catcher, who we have talked about many times on this show, and I think made a great decision to take his time and obviously head over to Houston. But the way that he calls a game, the comfort level that those pitchers had to let him call it, to do his job back there, to run that defense, it really is impressive for just how young he is. And if he keeps doing this and Aaron Judge does not regress and stays as solid as he is, baseball is in for a Groundhog Day in the next 3 or 4 years. And we could very well see especially if there is pitching coming up in the minor leagues, or if they can make a move for a young arm or two in that starting rotation, we could very well start seeing a Cubs-Yankees type back and forth for Major League Baseball supremacy very soon, much to the chagrin of my dad, as you all know, who is not a Yankees fan. But, I mean, they are just doing Brian Cashman has an outstanding job as a general manager for that team. He's made the right decisions when he's had to. He's been a seller at the right time and got the right things back for it. I've been very impressed by him. And I hate to say, but there is a possibility that another World Series trophy may be in the Bronx, I would say easily within the next decade.
Oh, I would say probably within the next 3 years. In fact, I wouldn't actually put a small dynasty past them in the next 10 years. I mean, I could see 3 or 4 going to the Yanks in the next decade.
Thank you for saying that. I'm officially back in my family, so I'm happy because I didn't want to get as committed to that as you. So thank you. I am back to being the favored son. So I do appreciate your forthrightness.
Well, that was coming anyway because that was coming anyway, right? Because I was the kid who came on the show and said maybe baseball should end in ties. And
it's true.
We knew I was going to get disowned for that. But
yes, and you did, and you got crucified on Facebook. But
I did.
As much as I appreciated your absolute destruction by all of our Facebook faithful and all of our listeners, again, guys, you can find us on Facebook at Left Field with Chris and Graham, as well as at OO Left Field on Twitter. And we are brought to you by the Grueling Truth Network. where legends speak. Again, The Grueling Truth on Facebook and at Grueling Truth on Twitter. And also thank you to MLB Mayhem for supporting us and being here with us for the last month or so and their continuous support. MLB Mayhem on Facebook and at MLB Mayhem on Twitter. So, like I was saying, as much as I enjoyed watching you get destroyed on social media, the problem was, and to be fair, a lot of it came, I think, with a bit of an asterisk, similar to the way that we view Barry Bonds, in that it wasn't quite what we were trying to say. I don't think quite translated in the way that we wanted it to. And there's a little bit more to this. And I know you told me that you kind of backed off on your opinion just a tad. So I'm going to let you have the floor to explain why you were a moron, and then I'll go ahead and come in. Maybe we can have a bit more of a level-headed discussion on this topic.
Sure. Look, I was coming off the heels of 2 marathon games. I saw players that I would like to see play long and healthy careers risk terrible injury to play these long marathon games. I realize they don't happen very often, but the fact that they do happen and the fact that these guys are risking injury to play in front of 9 people in the stands seemed excessive to me. So, of course, I knee-jerked and I made an overreaction and I said, hey, maybe baseball should end in ties. Let me regress from that position a bit. Baseball should not end in ties anymore.
Consistent.
Because baseball used to end in ties all the time.
Yep.
Even in the modern era, back before there were stadium lights, if the game was not decided before it got dark, the game ended in a tie. That's just how it works. We've seen the All-Star game in the current century end in a tie because of the lack of available players. So I don't think that baseball should consistently end in ties. So what I do want to see is I want to see some way to mitigate the possibility of injury. And if that's let him play 13 innings and then put a runner on second base for the 14th, so be it. But mitigate the possibility of injury for the players on the field and also mitigate the exhaustion of both the players and the fans, because we all know that only guys like you and me are the type of people who are still sitting in the stands at 1 o'clock in the morning in the bottom of the 16th inning. 50,000 other people have left. They don't care anymore.
But at the end of the day, and to your point about ties, you're right. And Bob Barnett, one of our listeners, mentioned this on Facebook, and I appreciate you, Bob, for doing so, said they had ties back before they had lights. Also had time limits on games in order to catch trains, and that's true. When trains were needed, ties were not uncommon. There were 3 standard reasons a game might have to be called: darkness, rain, or one of the teams had a train to catch. If, when they stopped play, the score was even, the game was a tie, assuming they had gotten in 5 innings, and nothing at all, they had not. So if it wasn't even an official game, the game didn't exist. And I understand what your point is, but at the end of the day, and this is an argument that you made, is that if they stayed they got the gate, if they stayed and got their concessions, they've already made money. Anybody that's still there, anybody that's still watching is just free baseball to them, and they're still making money in concessions. But if you like baseball, you're going to want to watch. And I get that when it comes to being during the work week, things where you can't stay and watch, I get it, and that happens. But you can't change a rule or a part of the game just because some people might have to go to work the next day, when in the grand scheme, let's look at last year, for example. In 185 extra inning games out of the 2,428 total games played, that's 7.6%. Even made it into extra innings. Nearly 66% of those ended in 10 or 11. And just 8 games lasted 15 innings or longer.
Well, and I get that. So I guess what I'm saying is I want to see a mitigation for those 8 games, right? Because in the grand scheme of things, are those 8 games really worth the loss of a player for weeks at a time due to injury? Are those 8 games in the grand scheme of things worth playing if nobody's watching them? I mean,
of course they're worth playing because
day,
you have to play them in order to get to that extra inning point anyway.
At the end of the day, if no one's watching the game, I mean, baseball is a fan sport. It's a sport made for watching, right? It's not like, other things that people do in the world that are not spectator sports. Baseball is a spectator sport. That's what it's for. If you're not playing in front of an audience, TV or physical or otherwise, why play? Why are you still playing in the 19th inning when there are 5 people in the stands and 11 people watching on television and everybody else in the world is asleep and not paying attention?
I understand your point there, but the whole idea of it being televised is to make those advertising dollars. So in the key time of night when you are looking at what the ratings are for your game, that's already been attained by the time the 9th inning comes around. So to me, if I'm an advertiser and you're just running extra innings and you have to keep running my ad, I'm happy because the people that might still be watching who either didn't see a certain parts of the game or maybe have been inundated with my advertisement, that's better for me.
Maybe. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's a spectator sport. If you're not playing for spectators, then why keep it going if nobody's going to watch it? Figure out a way to end it early. Figure out a way to end it while people are still paying attention to it. Figure out a way to end it while people still care. I don't care how you do it, but find a way to mitigate it. If it means going to the 14th inning and then starting with a runner on a base, and hey, if you want that base to be first base, I'm fine with that too, because it still offers an opportunity for that game to come to an end. No one wants to watch 6 hours of baseball.
Yes, great catch. I agree. No one wants to watch 6 hours of baseball. I don't think you were talking in the dead Latin language. And let's be honest. Baseball has changed the least out of the 4 major sports in the U.S. Out of hockey, football, basketball, and baseball, baseball has been the most rigid and not changing. Now, to me, I still think changing the layout is ludicrous. But if you want to change it, one of the things we could easily do is like you mentioned last year, we mentioned to Adnan, actually the first time we had him on, and I think this is going to kind of come back up because we're going to get his take on this. A guy who is very focused on the game of baseball, works with guys every day who played, who have been in Hall of Famers in the game, and we're going to ask him this same question and get an idea of what he thinks. But one of the things you could do is easily limit the number of pitching changes in an inning. I don't want to limit the number in a game because when things happen, when injuries happen, that kind of changes the whole gamut. But you can limit the number of changes in a game, which you had said before, I think should happen regardless. I think having to face 2 batters or even a minimum of 3 is fantastic. My other thing is stop the warm-up pitches, okay? We saw the other night that Wilson Contreras went out to the mound to stall. He finishes. He starts to walk back to the plate. Then Joe Madden comes out and then makes the change. Just to give, I don't know if it was Strope, whoever it was, a few extra pitches to warm up. To me, if you're going to be in the bullpen, get yourself ready. If you know you're going to be needed soon, start getting ready early. When you walk out there, the mound is the same in the bullpen, same measurements, same everything as it is on the field. If you want to give him 5 pitches just to get used to where the divots are on the mound, how it's been worn down throughout the game, that's fine. It can be like Little League. It can take less than 60 seconds. You don't need to go to commercial, and you roll right back into playing. We're looking at 2 minutes and 30 seconds or 2:45 to 3 minutes for nationally televised games for every single pitching change. And when you have 3 or 4 of those in an inning, that's easily 15 minutes of wasted commercial crap.
And it's true. And, baseball has made an attempt to mitigate that issue. They've tried saying, hey, as soon as the TV program comes back online, play has to start immediately. Immediately upon return from commercial break, play must resume. So they've set a time limit for the amount of time that players can spend warming up, and, it's helped a little. But we had another listener, John Victor, who says, I think baseball should do what the NHL did and get creative. Ties are boring, and they'll cause issues with the standings. After the 9th, each team should start with a runner on first or in scoring position. Maybe they get to choose a new batting order each inning. Just no ties. Lame. So I get it. Ties suck. It's like kissing your sister. We had this conversation last week, and I backed off that point. I don't. But hey,
but if you're losing and you're the Bad News Bears, just think of it like kissing your stepsister.
Really hot stepsister.
There you go.
But I don't think baseball should end in ties. I'm a baseball purist. I don't want to be the guy that thinks baseball should end in ties, but I also don't want to sit here and say that baseball should just be allowed to be played for 25 innings and no one should say anything, because I don't believe that either. I think that we have to put player safety as a priority, and yes, this is a player safety issue, and we have to put these things that we've discussed that are killing baseball into a priority position as well. And length of game is one of the number one things that is killing baseball right now, because people think baseball's boring anyway. They don't want to watch hours and hours of it go on forever and ever and ever. So
I completely agree.
Something has to be done.
I can't argue there. I agree.
So, I mean, I get it. All or nothing, right? Change it now or don't change it. But you got to do something.
Yes. And I know you have an article coming out, I believe, on this sometime soon. And there's no real answer for it, guys. There's no easy answer, and we know it. But we do want to hear what your thoughts are on how to change it. I think that was the big thing is we had, the big thing was, no one wanted to change it. But tell us what your thoughts are to help relieve this issue of the long games where it just drags on and on. And we want to take whatever we can get, the top 2 or 3 responses that we get that we really, really like. We want to know. We want you guys to come on the show, tell us what your idea was, kind of how you thought, what it came to you, what you think about it, and why you think that would be the best implementation. So we're turning this show somewhat over to you guys. All right, we want you to help us find a way to, really to help fix the length of games. I know Carl Ravitch from ESPN has said the most radical way is to shorten 7 innings. Never going to happen. But if that's your idea, still bring it. I'd love to hear, what your actual thoughts are beyond just a 140-character tweet that I've seen out several times. And you know what? If anything, what we'll do is we'll take those thoughts and we'll send them to to the commissioner. We have email. We'll see where it goes. But we want to have you guys on the show. So something to look forward to. Again, you can always email us those thoughts, ooleftfield@gmail.com. Tweet them to us at ooleftfield on Twitter. Not going to be the easiest way because of the space. Or shoot us a message out of left field with Chris and Graham. We will get back to you. We're quick at getting back, usually within an hour or two if we're able to do so, and normally we are. And, of course, you can leave us a message on the Out of Left Field baseball community. But, again, email ooleftfield@gmail.com, and our Facebook page is going to be the best way. So, with that being said, time has been called. The manager's coming out. We're going to make a change, bring in a third party next on Out of Left Field. Adnan Virk from ESPN. It's the 1-year anniversary of the show. Stick around. We'll be right back Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham.
Okay, let's get right to it. Do you want an easy gift idea good all year round? Or maybe you just like to keep a steady supply of quality crafted microbrews delivered directly to your door? Either way, The Grueling Truth has a solution for you. Go to thegruelingtruth.net/beer to learn how you can join up with the Craft Beer Club and get the best American beers you've never heard of sent direct to you or that beer drinker on your gift list. The Craft Beer Club discovers exceptional craft brews from around the country and delivers them direct to you or your gift recipient. Every selection is produced by independent microbrewers employing traditional ingredients and time-honored brewing methods. Best of all, with the Craft Beer Club, there is no membership fee, no obligation, and any subscription may be canceled at any time. Choose from monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly to get the right amount of great beer to stock your fridge or someone else's. So help the grueling truth help you to fantastic beer year-round. Visit thegruelingtruth.net/beer and join the club, the Craft Beer Club.
U.S. delivery addresses only. Please enjoy Craft Beer Club products responsibly.
Hey, guys, and we are back here on Out of Left Field as promised. Adnan Virk along with us. You've heard him on ESPN on our show a bunch of times, of course, on his Cinephile podcast. Adnan, again, welcome back to the show. And from Chris and I, congratulations on the one-year anniversary of Cinephile.
Oh, Graham, Chris, I appreciate it, fellas. Great to be back with you again. You guys have been great supporters of the podcast, supporters of me, and good friends. So I'm thrilled to be back with you guys, and congrats to you guys as well on developing a strong following. Who would have thought, the three of us all achieving some measure of success? It's great.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you had, to be fair, you had quite a bit more success before Cinephile, but that has been I know it's kind of your baby, and we both have a huge appreciation and love for that. And I think I want to start off this with a question about Cinephile. And I know that you went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which I did. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. So I want to ask you, as someone who has a deep appreciation for the arts and for film, if you could provide us with the true metaphorical meaning of Taserface.
Yeah, I don't know if I could dig deep. You're right. Sometimes, listen, movies can be categorized as artsy and life-affirming and, illuminating the human condition. And sometimes you just go to have a good damn time. You know what I'm saying? And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is just a good time. You just go, and it maintains a lot of the charm of the original. You know, the original, fellas, was a huge hit and very unexpected. I mean, $745 million worldwide box office, which was a stunner because, a lot of these superhero movies, they become kind of oversaturated. There's just so many of them, and I get that there's an appreciation for them, but you go, how can you make them different? But what Guardians did was smart. They differentiated themselves with the irreverent humor, very off-kilter, and a great soundtrack, a lot of classic rock and classic tunes. So it's been impressive what they've been able to do, them and along with Deadpool, two superhero movies that feel different and feel fresh. As for the special meaning of Taserface, I don't know if I can go too much deeper, but I do love the fact that Baby Groot makes an appearance. So I am Groot to Baby Groot. Vin Diesel play the character.
Love it.
I think my favorite thing about Guardians of the Galaxy, and to be honest, when Guardians 1 came out, I wasn't as excited as maybe some other people were. I had been oversaturated by superhero movies. I had been disappointed by the first Avengers movie, and I was really impressed with how well they were able to develop those 4 characters in such a short period of time, or 5 characters in such a short period of time, in a way that they hadn't been able to accomplish even with individual character movies for the Avengers.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. You're right, because you know what? That's what often becomes, I think, passé with the superhero movies. They say, well, as long as you have some big explosions and a lot of stuff blowing up on the big screen, it's an IMAX, it'll be great. But you're right, if you can actually get some character development with these characters, if you can actually have the audience identifying with them, if you actually have, genuine emotion, then that's a win. And I know some people thought Guardians 2, there's a few too many, heartfelt, tugging at the heartstring moments, come to Jesus type moments, so to speak. But I didn't think so. I mean, listen, the movie's going to have a soft core, so to speak, and they're trying to be a little bit more emotional maybe than the first one. You can't just have a bunch of gags and explosions. You want to have some sweet moments as well. So I agree. If you can have good character development in these superhero movies, that's going to make them even more special. And that's why, again, Deadpool was so great, because that character, it was such a good anti-superhero because he's foul-mouthed and he's crass and he doesn't appear to be up to the job. But Ryan Reynolds, and talk about the melding of character and actor. Like, I don't think there will ever be a better role for Ryan Reynolds than Deadpool. He was perfect in that movie.
Marvel at one point in one of my favorite Deadpool comic books, because Deadpool the comic book has always been very fourth wall breaking also, and one of my favorite moments is when Deadpool refers to himself as an ugly Ryan Reynolds in the comic book, far before Ryan Reynolds ever played him.
Yeah, I mean that fact when he first sees himself, the guy's like, "Oh my God, you're so hideous," and he starts giving the one-liners how ugly he is. Like it's great. But you're right, I did not know that the comic book had predicted that Ryan Reynolds. Like they even had that line. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's great.
So as we get ready to move into baseball, I have to ask you this as we make a nice transition between the movies and the sports world. There have been a ton of great calls over the years, obviously, with everything from the Catch by Willie Mays, Don Larson's Perfect Game. Just hearing, I can still hear Joe Buck's call saying that the Red Sox were world champions. But you had probably one of the most insane calls in recent history in media history, and that is obviously those who watched or are watching the online, that the fact of the Oscars debacle. And I know you told me that it was kind of surreal that you even had been able to go to the Oscars and then actually work the Oscars in the capacity you did. But what was it like afterwards, kind of realizing that, I think probably without knowing it, that you had pretty much just broken that before it even had hit the airwaves?
Well, the first thing, actually, I had a terrible sinking pit in the bottom of my stomach, and I'll explain why. Because after what happened, after I turned it and I saw that the commotion was happening, I said, oh, my goodness, Moonlight won Best Picture, because I saw the kerfuffle and Warren Beatty unfolding in real time and trying to figure out and process what was happening. And then I saw Barry Jenkins, the director, going nuts. And then I realized, oh, my goodness. And then like a sportscaster, you kind of start to rise to the moment, like, oh, my goodness, Moonlight won Best Picture. My first fear, actually, as soon as we were done, because I just taped a phoner with Steve Levy for SportsCenter, and me and Ben Lyons were about to get going. And I got a text from my friend Claire, who's one of the producers on college football and college basketball, and she said, you're on Deadspin. And I said, oh, no. And anybody who's a broadcaster knows you're on Deadspin is like the worst 3 words in the English language, because they've just made such a habit of lampooning us, and whoever makes a dumb mistake, you're there. And, credit to them. I mean, Timothy Burke and the rest of the crew, like it's a funny website, because anything silly that happens, it's going to be on Deadspin. So I don't discredit the site. I actually think it's a real fountain of information. But as a broadcaster, if you're on there, like, oh, no. But then when I clicked on it, I said, oh, yes. Because at first Ben was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh, no, I can't believe somebody said the wrong word. One of us said a curse word, some inappropriate joke. You have no idea. Like every worst scenario is going through your head. And then once I saw it and the write-up said ESPN's Adnan Virk was among the broadcasters, Astro.com, check out their reaction, I said, oh, this is fantastic. And then my phone just started blowing up because everybody had seen that clip, and it went viral. So, yeah, it already was going to be my greatest Oscars ever just because I got to be there. But then the fact I got to be a sportscaster doing a sportscastery type call of this craziest ending in Oscars history, and then to have the moment go viral was insane. And, in fact, the next day is when I was besieged, because then that night me and Ben went to an Oscars party where Manchester by the Sea was being rewarded. So it was good to see Kenneth Lonergan, who had won an Oscar, and Casey Affleck won an Oscar. So I got to be in the same room as 2 Oscar winners and actually saw them holding their Oscars, which already was crazy enough. But then once I got back to the hotel, it was just every ESPN affiliate wanted to talk to me because they'd seen that clip. So I was on Mike and Mike, and then I flew to Atlanta, and I was on with Kerry Champion on SportsCenter, and I was on with Russillo, and I was on in the ESPN Seattle, ESPN San Diego, like you name it. I think I did like 15 different interviews the next day because everybody had seen the clip. And I guess for most people, guys, you just would be surprised, like, what is Adnan doing there? Like, if you just know me from Baseball Tonight or college football, college basketball, like, I don't understand. Why is he in a tuxedo, and why is he at Oscar.com screaming about Moonlight? So I guess that was more the shock that people are like, oh, I guess because of my podcast, Cinephile, which Ben Lyons happened to be a big fan of, and because he was one of the hosts with Oscar.com, he's the one that got me there. He had told the producers, literally the Academy, to say, listen, I got to have Adnan with me. This guy's dialed into the movies. He knows his stuff. He's a broadcaster. He's quick on his feet. So I think it was pretty amazing for all concerned that I got to be there. And then, like you said, to have that moment, it's still incredulous to me that it actually happened.
So I guess if I have to make a sports metaphor, and we always have to make sports metaphors, it feels like on this show. I think it's just our thing. But that's probably about the closest the Oscars have ever had to going into like an extra innings, right? They thought it was over. They thought they had an announcement of a winner, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, my clip, I said this is the Oscar Steve Harvey moment. Like, that's the first thing I thought of was when Steve Harvey screwed up Miss USA or Miss Universe, whatever the hell it was. So, like, that was, I'm like, oh, my God. Like, and you got to understand, right, guys, like, I wasn't watching it like everybody else was. Like, what would happen is that they would just tell us in our ears who won, and we were live stream, right? So on Oscar.com, it's me, Ben, Sophia, and Troy. So all they would tell us in our ear is, hey, La La Land won Best Picture. And then we would just start talking about La La Land being a great film. So only until afterwards, because if you hear the call, what I say is Warren Beatty read the wrong name. Of course, I didn't know that he just didn't know what to do and handed the card to Faye Dunaway, and she actually read the card. So that was the other part. When I flew home, the next day, I watched the Oscars as everybody else did to see what was going on because, like I said, they would just tell us in our ear, hey, Casey Affleck won, and then Ben and I would start talking about what a great film it was in his performance. So just to see how wild that was, like, poor Warren Beatty, what is he supposed to do? He's looking at the card going, this can't be right. I mean, and I felt for people go, how could you screw up? I go, are you kidding? If I'm 80 years old and I look at the card and all I see is Emma Stone, I would just like to think that, yeah, okay, it would be like if I saw the card said Tom Hardy, Mad Max, Fury Road. I go, okay, well, I guess Tom Hardy is the star of the film, so I guess that means Best Picture is Mad Max. Like, I don't think it's that inconceivable what he did, which is nothing. Like, he just held the card and then eventually handed it to her. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't think, guys, I would have the guts to say, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, 1 billion people are watching right now, but I've been given the wrong card. Can someone please come out here and give me the right card? Like, I don't know. I think he'd just be like, what's going on here? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it was a pretty incredible moment. So to kind of translate or transfer into baseball a little bit, Graham and I have been having this debate. Now, what are we in our second week of this argument, Graham?
Yep, second week, and you kind of got destroyed as we expected last week, but I think that's because the understanding of what we're going for kind of got lost a little bit.
And I backed off my position a little bit on this, but last week I watched those two insane marathon games, right? The Yankees and the Cubs. They went 18 innings, and it was a get-out game for both teams. And then a couple of nights later, I watched the Reds and the Giants go 17 innings. Luckily, both of them were playing again the next day in San Francisco, but a day game. So I started thinking, maybe we need to back off of this whole baseball just gets played until it's over thing because, Rizzo's out there. He'd gotten hit by Chapman in the 9th inning. He has this huge knot on his wrist where he got hit. You can see him in the next 9 innings just trying to stretch that knot out. And I said, you know what? Go 12 and then call it. And I realized that was a knee-jerk reaction, but what do you think about doing something to mitigate the length of these extra inning games, these really long marathon games?
Yeah, it's interesting, guys. Chris, you're not the first to throw that out there. I mean, Joel Sherman, I think, wrote an article recently in one of the New York papers about how after 12 innings, you just call it as a tie. A lot of other sports have ties. In football, you have a tie. When it goes to overtime, in soccer, we have ties. In hockey, you used to have a tie. It's not a big deal. Like, it completely kills your bullpen, and we saw that with Chicago, like you said, with that Sunday Night Baseball game and the Mets earlier in the year. And his point, I remember Sherman's article, he said, there's only about 7 games a year, I think, or something like that. Maybe 3 or 4 times each team gets affected like that. So he's like, over the course of the year, it's not that much. But then my view is that, well, if it's not that much, then why bother doing it? Like, either you do something drastic and say, all right, after 10 innings, which I think there's a lot of extra inning games that go past 10, you go, that's it, it's a tie. But 12, to me, I'm like, well, I don't really understand what we're doing here. Like, I would either go all the way. I'm like, yeah, we basically don't want extra innings anymore because it's too long in the regular season. But in the playoffs, have at it. Obviously, the playoffs should go to wherever. But kind of like what hockey's done in the regular season, you have shootouts. In the regular season, you have shootouts. And then the playoffs, the overtime goes forever. If you want to do that, I mean, again, I wouldn't be in favor of it, but at least it's a strong stance. I'm not crazy about the after 12 innings called as a tie. And then there's people like my friend Tim Kirchner who doesn't like any aspect of it because, as he points out, that's part of the game. If you change the rules now, then you're changing the way the game's played. The only situation I would say is this. If they keep it the way they do, they should expand the rosters a little bit because it is annoying seeing position players having to pitch. And although it's fun because it's unpredictable, I mean, I do get the fact if I was a manager at the 15th inning, I'd be like, oh, come on, man. If I had an extra pitcher out here, it'd be a little bit easier. So maybe it's time to expand the rosters. That would help mitigate the issue of extra innings. But oftentimes, I don't think it happens that much. It's just when it happens, it really kills the team and really deflates them, which I do understand.
And I've thought the same along the same lines that you are, and I think, and as Chris and I mentioned, I think the first time actually that we had you on was, and it's ironic because Buster only just wrote an article about this, and at the same time he had also had been talking. He'd been on Mike and Mike co-hosting with I think Greeny for the Day. And they were taking basically the 9 best ways to change baseball, and he was going to present it to Rob Manfred. And our idea was the fact of, I think one of the things that you can do is limit the number of pitching changes, or at least, how often you can change a pitcher, force a reliever to face a minimum of 2. Because this whole idea of having to be able, that you can have 1 and then 1 and then 1 and then 1 back to back to back, and we're going 2 minutes and 30 seconds or 2:45, for allowing pitchers to warm up is kind of, it makes no sense. So to me, if you change that, or at least what I told Chris also, the idea of stopping this whole idea of warm-up pitches. I mean, the guy's warming up in the bullpen, let him come out, throw 5 pitches, give him 60 seconds, forget the commercial break, and go back into baseball. I think that's an easier way to save time than trying to, start tweaking how we handle extra inning games that happen to that extent so infrequent.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think that's an easy one because too often they have that situation with those warm-up pitches coming. Like you said, I mean, you've already been warmed up. Why throw them again? Like, that's why I didn't bemoan the loss of the intentional walk. I'm like, yeah, just go. Like, I don't understand. Like, how many times does the ball actually go where it shouldn't go? I mean, you give them a free pass and we'll just move it on here. So, yeah, I'm completely with Buster on that concept that, you've already warmed up, come in and go. And that's the nail on the head that you just mentioned. Ultimately, I wouldn't shorten games. I wouldn't try to have it end in a tie. The warm-up pitches is one aspect of that. But ultimately, I would start to look at, limiting the number of pitching changes. Because if you really want to help speed this thing up, you cannot have the micromanaging that we now see in the game today. And I get it from a manager's perspective. Like, listen, man, I'm trying to win. So if I bring in a guy for one pitch or one batter, that's my business. And we can blame or fault Tony La Russa because he's the one who really started that, the specialization of the bullpens with those A's teams of the 90s. So that's one way you could certainly do it. You just go, you know what? 3 pitching changes a game or no warm-up pitches. I like both of those ideas, as radical as they would be. I'm sure managers would complain and say, well, that's not fair. Again, if it would go extra innings, then you'd really get screwed, right? Because all of a sudden you say, well, I've already used my 3 pitching changes. Now I can't have this guy throw 6 innings who's a reliever. But you know what? It would definitely speed things up.
It might convince managers to put long relievers into that 25-man roster that maybe aren't going to get used on a daily basis, just guys that they can use in case they need a guy to go 3 or 4 or 5 innings in an extra innings game.
And I'll tell you what else I would do, Adnan, go along with that is just as with a mound conference where you get one additional conference per inning, where you get one conference and you got to pull your pitcher. It can be the same way. Hey, you have a bullpen, you can make 1 pitching change per inning. And then the next inning, okay, if we go another inning, you get 1 change. And that way it at least stops you from trying to do this every couple of batters, trying to do that. And another way to try and help streamline the game, because I think as we all know, baseball has been, out of the 4 major sports in the U.S., the one that has changed the absolute least.
Yeah, I just saw Derek Jeter, that very cringeworthy interview he did with Alex Rodriguez on CNBC. And, the one point that Jeter made, because the interview asked him about that, just to, changing the game. And he said, listen, I think baseball is a great game. It's the best sport around. But you do need to have evolution. Like, that's part of the sport. You do need to evolve and try to change things up a little bit. So I agree. Baseball has definitely been resistant to change. But maybe that's a step in the right direction because other sports have done that. And listen, initially, no matter what you do, everyone's always going to raise a fuss, okay? No matter what, everyone's going to go, oh, no, they're changing the game. This is ridiculous. How can they do this? But you know what? Eventually, people just accept it because, like, the 3 of us all love baseball. Eventually, you say, well, it's not like I'm going to stop watching the sport. That's always my friend Ryan Russillo's point. Russillo always says when people say, oh, well, they got to speed up the game, he goes, well, is that all of a sudden going to add more baseball fans? Like, he goes, I think if you like baseball the way it is. And if you think it's too slow, then you're probably not going to watch it. And if you think it's needs to be changed, there's always going to be little changes here and there. But Ryan's point is always that there's too much talk about pace of play. He thinks that, those that love the game love it the way it is. The whole idea of shortening the season, some people mention that. And then my friend Keith Loss says, well, no, I mean, I like baseball. He goes, I like the fact it's 162 games because I can always watch baseball. If there's 154, that's less games for me to watch. So that doesn't make sense either. So I think it's an interesting dilemma to have for baseball.
So you talk about baseball needing to evolve or baseball being resistant to evolution and evolution being sort of key to baseball's success and survival in the modern day sports world. And I have kind of a long and nuanced question that I'd like to ask you that is along the lines of that evolution. Just about a year ago, give or take a few months, was the first time that you were on our show. And we asked you a question about Adam Jones's statements about baseball being a white man's sport.
Right.
And then fast forward a year-ish later, and Adam Jones has another issue with racism in baseball. So I got really interested in sort of his response and the response of some of the other people. The response of Curt Schilling upset me a little bit, but I started doing research. Originally I was going to write an article. It turned into a research paper, and now I have to rewrite it so it can be an article again. But at the beginning of this season, there were fewer than 65 African-American players on Major League Baseball rosters. 63 was the actual number. And that blew me away. 800 and something players on the active rosters in Major League Baseball. That's a 40-man roster in Major League Baseball, and less than 65 of them are African-American. And the only thing that I could come up with is that it has to be, as opposed to being something that says something negative about Major League Baseball, it has to be something about the way baseball is marketed to young athletes of color across the United States that's different from the way football and basketball are marketed to those athletes.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I was actually reading an article, Jack Dickey wrote it in Sports Illustrated about this whole issue, and Adam Jones talking about the racism in the sport. He said, listen, I think it was in 1986, definitely in the mid-'80s, it was like 18 and 20% of players are African-American. That's the heyday. And that it's terrifying to think. I think it's 6.5%. You mentioned the number, 65, whatever it is, but 6.5% is the same number as back in 1957. Like, I honestly find that incomprehensible. Like, how could it be such a small percentage? Maybe it's 1967 even, because 57 sounds way too long ago. But even if it was 67, I mean, that's 50 years ago. Like, that's how far back the game's gone in terms of black players being involved. And Dickey pointed out a couple reasons. He said, one, it can be an expensive sport, more expensive than, let's say, basketball. As a young age, he said that the way the sport is marketed, definitely an issue. The fact that, the sport's become very regionalized. The fact that in African-American communities, football and basketball are just seen as more attractive sports. They're just more fun to play, that those communities support it more. But I think ultimately it is definitely a concern. I think that you cannot but be concerned about it, because if you've got the sport that's essentially just going to be whites and Latinos, then you can't just ignore an entire fan base. And as Chris Rock, who is a baseball fan, in one of his comedic specials, he did the whole rant about baseball, and he said, listen, for a long time, black culture has defined what's cool. And the fact that blacks are not playing baseball at the major league level shows that for a lot of people, they don't think that baseball's cool. And Rock was joking, saying, listen, I'm in New York, I'm a Yankees fan, I'm into it, but I'm one of the rare ones. Like, among black people, they look at me like, really, Chris, you still like baseball? So it's definitely an issue that's going to require a cultural shift. I completely agree as far as the marketing. They've tried to do that with the RBI program, trying to promote baseball in inner cities. And there's definitely some minor league players that I've heard about who are up and coming who could be studs, which could help. But I worry about guys. You're right. Adam Jones, he's a veteran. He's been around a long time. CC Sabathia's in his final year. He's a prominent African-American player. Like, these guys are going to go away. Who are going to be the guys to replace them? Andrew McCutchen, already in decline after being an MVP. So I'm concerned about it. Every year we talk about it, especially on Jackie Robinson Day, April 15th. We go, where have all the black players gone? I hope that the shift happens, but I don't have any easy answers for it. I just think ultimately football and basketball right now are more attractive to those communities.
And I want to ask you something, Adnan. I'm sorry, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to, do you think that that's because football and basketball have been marketed to the African-American community in the United States, much the way that baseball has been marketed to the Latino community in Central and South America and in the Caribbean, in that if you do well in these sports, this is an opportunity for you to make a lot of money, get out of the situation that you're in quickly, and change your situation by being a great athlete in these sports, and that football and basketball are marketed that way in the African-American community in a way that baseball isn't.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. Like I said, I just think that, for those communities, they just say, all right, like you said, this is an outlet. This is a way that you can be successful. You can overcome your circumstances, and you can do so in a really profitable manner, in a really cool way. Like, hey, man, I get to play sports for a living. I'm going to be a middle linebacker. I'm going to be a quarterback. I'm going to be, like LeBron James or whoever it is. Like, I think part of it too, guys, is the fact that those other sports sell their stars better. Like, I think they just know, hey, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Steph Curry, that resonates. Whereas Mike Trout, Clayton Kershaw, those names don't resonate in an African-American community because, like, listen, there's just not as many black baseball players who are superstars, unlike those other sports. So if you already have the stars there that all of a sudden these kids are going to emulate more often than not, it's kind of like a chicken and the egg argument. Like, how do you overcome that? You need to have that great black superstar who, that if baseball had a LeBron James, then I think you'd see a lot more kids aspiring to want to go and follow in his footsteps. If you don't have that black superstar, then it's harder.
And I think part of that also goes to, in the same token, is you see in the NBA more so with LeBron, Durant in free agency, with Curry, and kind of the way that Steve Kerr runs that team when he's been healthy enough to be there, or in football, that the players, especially the black players who are so important, have much more control over what happens. We see guys holding out in the NFL. We see LeBron almost being looked at as the GM. And in baseball, you very rarely get that, and more so it ends up happening like with Adam Jones or with the disrespect that Andrew McCutchen appeared to have been shown. Obviously, he felt more personally by an organization where he had been with for so long, but the Pirates trying to shop him, and now with the Marte suspension, now he kind of takes his position back and almost kind of took a dig, like, I'm back where I belong, which for those who had paid attention, it really felt like a dig at the front office. And it makes me wonder, whereas we saw what Bautista did again, which caused another issue with the bat flip, and Bryce Harper has been on record saying this, that he would like to see the game lighten up. We know that, the Icky Shuffle and the Dirty Bird with Dion and, guys, kind of pounding their chest, or Steph with the shimmy when he hits a three, that idea of that looseness, that enjoyment that we saw in the WBC is really looked down upon in the United States, especially based on Ian Kinsler's comments. Do you think that if baseball could learn to lighten up, for lack of a better term, that would be a bigger draw for younger kids?
No doubt. I think that's a great point, and I think that's definitely something that resonates, because young kids go, listen, it's a new generation now, right? These get off my lawn types who are just complaining about millennials that taking over the world now, and it's me first generation. Everything's about social media and your Instagram and your Twitter and your Facebook. Like, you know what? Accept it. That is the way it is, okay? People want to celebrate who they are. If you want to say there's a rise in narcissism, okay, great. The decline of American civilization, complain about it. But you know what? People want to stand out. They want to know that people appreciate them, and sometimes that can be equated by how many retweets and likes that you get. And part of that with sports is having a good time, that you should only want to play sports because you're enthusiastic about it. If you treat it like a job, you're generally not going to enjoy it as much. And I think the World Baseball Classic was a tremendous example of how people can really love sports, and that Latin American culture is something that should be appreciated. And that there's too many of these Ian Kinslers and Brian McCanns, and these guys are just stuck in their crotchety old ways. I'm like, man, baseball's a fun game. And the Bautista bat flip was a great moment against the Texas Rangers. It was a cathartic moment and spoke for an entire nation. And what happened the other night against the Braves, maybe that's an unnecessary bat flip. You think staring down the pitcher. But I think it can go both ways. Like, everyone's always focusing on hitters can only do it in certain times. But you know what? Hey, a pitcher can get fired up, all right? If you struck out Bautista with the bases loaded and you want to pump your fist, go ahead. Fernando Rodney's been doing the bow and arrow for how many years? Like, Brian Wilson would always have his celebrations. So I'm in favor, man, of more tactics, more fun. You got to make the game entertaining, and I think that definitely is a big part of it. People look at, again, back to Chris Rock's point. For many years he said black culture determines what's cool. If black people are looking at baseball going, it's a bunch of stodgy old white guys who are stuck in their ways, then obviously that's going to affect younger people.
So just to cap off sort of this discussion, I did look up the demographics, and you were right. So 7.7% was the number for 2017, and that hovers right between the 7.4% of 1958 and the 8.8% of 1959, which is terrifying.
Yeah, I'm insane. Think about that. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier only like a decade prior to that. That is honestly staggering. That is. Imagine you get to a point that you say, okay, the African American rate in baseball is now the same as it was in the 1940s. That is deeply troubling. And the only thing I can say is Bud Selig was aware of it, tried to do something about it. Rob Manfred is aware of it. He's certainly trying to do something about it. But that's upsetting to me to think about that. That's how few African-American players there are, especially since, like I said, 86 was not that long ago. 30 years ago, you had 20%, like 1 in 5. That's a good ratio. in comparison to how many African Americans are in this country. To go that low right now, that's disappointing. The only thing I can say is at least I am happy to see that, like I said, the Latino culture has certainly embraced it. And you go to different communities, especially the Dominican Republic, the way the entire country rallies behind it. But yeah, that's shocking to think it's back in the late 50s for black participation. That's awful.
Latino Americans or Latinos make up the second largest demographic in baseball at 27.5%. As of 2016, I can only imagine that's grown. And one thing I will say, just sort of to walk this out, I know Graham has a question that he wants to ask you about the Yankees start this season. But one thing I will say, just to sort of walk this out, is that I think another thing that a lot of white baseball fans might not recognize this issue, because that huge number of Latino players, and when you're talking about guys from Venezuela and Dominican Republic and Cuba, those guys are really dark. So they might not see guys like Starling Marte, who a lot of white fans might assume is African American, or guys like David Ortiz, who a lot of white fans might assume are African American. That they don't see that decline in African American players, because they see so many players of color. It is a wide demographic of players of color. Just that one demographic that you would expect to stay sort of stagnant at the U.S. demographics rate at about 14 or 15% has just declined horribly.
Yeah, I think no doubt that you're right. That could be a separate issue, because Roberto Clemente used to face that. As the first great Latin superstar, he said that because he was dark-skinned, a lot of his people just assumed he was African American. They didn't even bother to know the difference. The fact he's actually Puerto Rican. So you're right. That is something to be taken into consideration. The whole light skin versus dark skin Latinos, because unfortunately they can sometimes face their own discrimination within that culture. And you're right. For the average family, they don't recognize what that is. But bottom line is, baseball's an issue. They're going to fix it. I hope they fix it. And at the very least, they're aware of it.
So before we let you go, we've had you on for a while. I don't want to keep you too long. I want to ask you, really, we had a great series, obviously, this past Sunday between the Yankees and the Astros, and a new addition to the ESPN family, and Mark Teixeira, a player who I loved when he played for the Braves. I was heartbroken when he went to the Yankees as a kid, because I was not a Yankee fan. But I have, more so doing this podcast, I have found an appreciation for that organization, and seeing the way that they have transitioned from kind of being that ball club who just went out and spent exorbitant amounts of money on guys to really piecing things together. And I heard, and I think he may have been actually talking with you in one of his first times on about Aaron Judge, and saying that he really thought that Aaron Judge should be the Yankee starting right fielder. It was going to be the best way for him to get experience, to really see what he was about after that horrible 196 end to his year. So I'm curious if Tex has talked to you, because we'd love to have him on. I've reached out to him, but Twitter only goes so far. So, we do what we can, how we can. But I'm curious if he has any idea what in the hell Aaron Judge managed to do this offseason to go from hitting 196 to absolutely raking the ball in Yankee Stadium, and just, making a fantastic case for Rookie of the Year with, less than 2 months into the season.
No, I'm glad you cited that baseball tonight, because you're right. That was Tex's first show, and I remember that vividly, because I asked him, who should be in right, Hicks or Judge? And he said unequivocally Judge. And afterwards, he was asking for feedback, because Tex is a really nice guy. He's very engaged, and he wants to do a good job. He said, give it to me straight if it's good or if it's bad. And I said, no, that was good, because a lot of times analysts, when they first get hired, they still feel like former players, and it's hard to differentiate. And sometimes you don't want to be critical, and you kind of seesaw. And I said, what I liked about that is when I asked you on the air, who do you like? You said Judge right away. You didn't say, they're both good guys, and I think they both could make a good decision. The Yankees are in good shape, by the way. He just said it flat out, and he said, well, I believe it. And you're right. The way that we've seen Judge just burst on the scene, especially this year, has been amazing. The biggest thing that Tex has said to me, and it's been corroborated by the likes of Tim Kirkchin and others, is he's just a lot more selective. He said he's cut down on his strikeouts a ton from last year. Last year was more of a free swinger, just swinging for the fences. Now he's a much better batting eye. He's being much more selective, looking for the right pitches, and he's got that incredible power. Now, Kirkchin did point out, guys his size historically do not hold up well. The amount of guys who are 6'6" or taller who have been real successes, there's only a handful. It's Frank Howard, it's Darryl Strawberry, it's Richie Sexton, I believe Frank Thomas,
Johnson.
6'5". Yeah, Randy Johnson. Yeah, I'm just thinking position players.
As a pitcher, though.
You're right. Throwing hitters,
right.
Pitchers. You're right. But there's not many, and the reason why is hitters because there's just so much ground to cover. Like that strike zone's huge. So eventually, pitchers just figure out a way that how much plate coverage can the guy have. So there's, I do worry historically, how many great years can Judge have, because in the past, it's not a good predictor of success. But I'm not going to rain on his parade right now because he's unbelievable to watch. He can mash the ball. I want to see Judge versus Stanton in the home run derby. They can both hit it a mile. The fact that Girardi spoke of Judge and invoked Derek Jeter when talking his character and his temperament, I mean, that you can't get higher praise than that. So I think it's been a great story, certainly for the Yankees, and it's better for baseball when the Yankees are good. Let's face it, you want to have your best teams be successful, and that's not to poo-poo small market teams. I think the Royals winning the World Series was an awesome story. That's a great fan base that's been revived. But look at all the major markets. There's in the NFL, if the Dallas Cowboys are a big team or the Pittsburgh Steelers, then guess what? Attention and interest goes up a little bit. So same thing for baseball. It doesn't mean that I think every year we should have the Yankees and Dodgers in the World Series. But you want to have your big market teams be successful. And if the Mets aren't good right now, the Giants are having a down year, it's good to have the Yankees good again, because whether people love them or hate them, it's always a natural talking point for baseball on national level.
So do you think that Joe Girardi has gone ahead and put himself in position to be the AL Manager of the Year, or can A.J. Hinch, with the way that Astros team is playing, which I expected them to be good, and I had a chance to talk to Brian McCann down here in Orlando at a golf tournament back in around January, and I think he credits all the success to having his beard back. He said that looking in the mirror for 3 years and not recognizing your own face was just kind of weird. So the beard has done wonders for him, but to me right now, early on, it's a Girardi, A.J. Hinch run. Obviously it's only May, but are you guys seeing the same thing?
Yeah, that's a great one too. I would have a write-in vote for Paul Molitor only because people are going to have him fired, and all of a sudden the Twins right now have the best record in the Central, and I don't think they're going to sustain that because eventually the Indians are going to catch him. They just have far too much talent. But the way Jose Barrios pitched last night was great to see. So that's good news for Molitor and the Twins. But I'm with you. It's got to be Hinch. Alex Torres, a good friend, was with me for a few years on Baseball Planet on ESPN. He's now the bench coach in Houston. We still text all the time. He's thrilled with the fact the Astros are the best team in baseball, and I think they're not going anywhere. Credit to Sports Illustrated. Back in 2014, their cover in the middle of the year had said, your 2017 World Series champions, the Houston Astros. They predicted that a few years ago, that all this great young talent will come to fruition. Correa is phenomenal after a slow start to the year because the WBC hangover, but I love Altuve, obviously Springer. Keuchel's back to his Cy Young form from a couple of years ago. So, yeah, I think the Astros are the best team in the league, and I would agree. Hinch right now for me is Manager of the Year.
I'd really like to see, and this is just from a fan standpoint, I really, really want to see the Astros and the Yankees get back together for the ALCS. I think that would be an amazing series.
Yeah, I think so, man, because you know what? There's a lot of talented storylines that you look at right away, and you go, you got the old guard, so to speak, with the Yankees, even though it's a new team, obviously of young players, but just people identify them with the establishment. And the Astros, there's people who haven't paid much attention how good and how much fun that team is. I agree. Astros-Yankees would be an awfully compelling series and would feel different. I think going into the year on paper, you go, oh, Indians-Cubs again, those are the favorites. And not that those teams aren't really good and they won't be there, but right now the Cubs are a 500 team. The Indians are around that mark. Astros-Yankees would feel like some new blood, even while being kind of relatively fresh. So I agree. That'd be fun.
Right.
Well, and as always, man, I love talking to you. We love having you on. You've kind of been the staple for our show. And as always, we're always open for you on anything that you want to talk about. So it was nice to be able to talk a little bit of baseball after what was, I think, for us, one of our best shows, our most well-received show. And we got a lot of love from friends of yours and colleagues of yours and from all of our listeners as well. So we can't thank you enough. You've kind of been one of the driving forces behind helping us continually grow. So thank you as always, and thank you so much again for coming on, taking some time with us.
Oh, such kind words, Graham. Chris, I appreciate it. And I agree. I echo those sentiments. That was a lot of fun. Last time I was able to come on and talk about my faith and have you guys be so receptive and, genuine and so sincere. It's nice to know people are actually genuinely caring, and you guys are genuine friends of mine, and anything I can do, I'm going to be there. And hopefully, Graham will be at that wedding in the fall.
Man, I hope so too, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get together if you're down here for the All-Star game in a couple of months down in Miami.
I was about to say that's definitely going to happen because I already got the go-ahead, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to be calling the celebrity softball game, so I cannot wait for that. I have no idea which celebrities will be involved, but I will be there. So, yes, let's definitely hook up at some point in Miami.
Well, for the record, Chris and I have been doing the show for a year, and he is picking up adult league baseball. So if you know somebody who wants an old guy, Chris can fill the bill of the old guy.
I like it. Just a couple of ringers that I pull off the bench. It's like The Simpsons, when Mr. Burns pulls in Mattingly and Canseco, you guys will be my guys.
There you go. And then again, thanks a million. Guys, again, thanks for joining us on Out of Left Field. Look forward to talking to you next week. A ton of stuff to get into next week. Chip Carey will be joining us from the Atlanta Braves. We will see you next week on Out of Left Field.